welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be sharing my journey on the MCAT, on which I scored a 520, which was the 97th percentile. So I took the MCAT last August, which was the summer after my third year of undergrad. I know that a lot of you are probably studying for the MCAT right now, and so I thought I would share some of my experiences and make sure that you guys don't fall into the same traps that I did and make the same mistakes. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing my background going into the MCAT, how I got started with it, what were the resources I used, as well as my 4-month schedule, which worked really well for me. I'm also going to share some general tips as well as specific tips for certain sections that I found really difficult on the exam. I really hope that this video will help a lot of you out there who are also feeling quite overwhelmed with the MCAT, which I know that I personally was when I got started. So don't worry, I know it's really scary to have to learn all of this content in however much time you have, but if I could do it, you can also do it. So my majors were neuroscience and psychology at the University of Toronto. So I did have that life science background. I took some physiology and biology and chemistry. However, these were all around first year courses and they weren't that extensive. If you also come from a science background, I do think that the summer after third year would be a very good place for you to take the MCAT because the material is still fresh in your mind and you have already gone through most of your undergrad, so you have a solid knowledge base. Please know that in this video, I'm only sharing my personal experience, so this is what I honestly learned, and I know that a lot of you come from different programs, so you might have different experiences. So when I first wanted to sign up for the MCAT, it was around March last year, and I took a 2-hour mock exam on WISE Prep, and this was my score. As you can see, it was absolutely pathetic. I was so devastated after getting this score. I didn't remember most of what I learned in first year, to be honest. As you can see, this was before I could do any sort of prep at all. But in 4 months, I was able to get a 520. So if you're also having that diagnostic score that is killing your will to live, don't worry, you will be able to achieve that high score. This is also my first tip is I know a lot of people say you should take diagnostic tests early. However, I do have kind of a controversial opinion on this because I don't feel like taking a diagnostic for the MCAT is particularly helpful, especially when you're just starting out because you're not going to know the material. It's only going to discourage you. So don't worry about taking that diagnostic first before you review any material, unless you are really good at biology and chemistry already. Maybe you are, but if you haven't started any prep, I don't suggest you do a diagnostic. Just go straight into content review. And you can take a diagnostic maybe 1 month into prep or maybe half a month just to see how much more you need to go. But I don't want you to get super stressed out about the diagnostic super early on. So just to go over the MCAT super briefly, this is just a very brief overview. Please go on the AAMC website to read more about it. But in general, there are 4 sections on the MCAT. There is biology and biochemistry, there is chemistry and physics, there is also psychology and sociology. These 3 sections are all 95 minutes long. Finally, there is the critical analysis and reasoning skills section, which is arguably the most important section if you're applying to Canadian schools, and this is 90 minutes long with a little less questions. It's only 53 questions and the other sections are 59 questions. So on the exam, you will only be given scrap paper, some headphones and earplugs, as well as a periodic table. You don't have a calculator, you don't have any cheat sheets or equations. Also, the format will be on the computer. I personally had thought it was a written test until like 3 months before the test. So yeah, it's all done on a computer. The entire test, including breaks, is about 7.5 hours long. So towards the end of your prep, you should probably be building up your stamina towards taking a long test. So going on to the materials that I used, I purchased the AAMC MCAT official prep bundle, and this was around $268 when I purchased them. This includes the official practice tests. I believe there are 6 of them, including the free ones, and also the section banks and Q banks. This is arguably the most essential item you will have to purchase if you want a really high score. But this is really important in my opinion because it's representative of the real test. I think they use past tests, so please buy it if you're able. I also use the Kaplan books. Honestly, you can buy any edition. It can be secondhand. I got mine for cheap as a secondhand. As long as it's after 2015, it should be fine. So I used all the books except Cars because there's not much there to study. It's mostly practice. I also purchased UWorld MCAT's 3000 question bank, and they had explanations as well. This was super helpful for me during my final 2 months of practice. It's not essential because it was quite expensive for the 3 months. You can definitely find other free resources online. Personally, I would recommend it just because it was just a massive amount of questions and it had really extensive explanations. I definitely know a lot of people who managed to get really high scores without using UWorld or other expensive resources. For example, you can use Jack Weston, which I used a lot, and they have free lessons, free prep resources and exams, and also a lot of practice problems. They have daily passages that I would do every day, and it helped me keep on track with practice. And for my content review, I also used Anki, which was this flashcard program, and I would make my own cards as well as use pre-made cards. This helped me schedule my memorization during content review with the most effective timeline, so I didn't have to manage all these chapters on my own. It would tell me which cards were due. So if you don't know how to use Anki, I really suggest you use this for your MCAT as well as for your future medical school classes. Finally, the best free resource is of course YouTube. I'm a very visual learner, so I found videos super helpful. I'm going to be recommending some of the most helpful channels that I found really helped me in later sections. So going on to my 4-month schedule, during the first 2 months, it was mostly content review. I wanted to power through the content review in the first 2 months so that I can get started with practicing. So in month 1, I started the Kaplan books. In the morning, I would do Anki cards. I would review the cards that were due from the previous day, and I would start reading new Kaplan chapters. I would do 2 to 3 chapters a day, and I would switch the chapters up because I didn't want to just study bio for 1 day, for example. That could get boring and dry, so I would switch up the chapters throughout the day to keep it fresh. One thing I would really suggest is to review Anki cards every day and finish the cards that are due that day because they can build up really fast and you can get stuck with a huge amount of cards and be left with no motivation to go through them. I always make sure to finish my Anki cards in the beginning of the day and then do my new content review. So during my studying, I would make sure to Google or YouTube any material that I haven't understood yet to make sure that I grasp the concepts before moving forward, because it's very hard to come back later and think about what do I still have to learn, because it's just hard to motivate myself that way. So I always make sure to finish every chapter solidly before moving on to the next. As well, during studying, I would make new Anki cards for the new content or edit my old cards if I feel like they are unnecessary. During month 2, it was almost the same thing. I would do Anki cards daily. I would do 2 chapters a day, and I got started with Jack Weston's practice problems because it was a free resource And I feel like some of those problems are sort of on the easier side. So I wanted to get my feet wet with the practice early in my studying so I know how I should improve and to motivate me to fill in the gaps in my knowledge. In the middle of month 2, I purchased the AAMC official prep bundles and I got started with the questions. I would suggest starting out with the section banks because this bank has 300 questions split up into 4 of these sections so that you can sort of get a taste of the questions of each section so that you know which ones you need to focus on. Then during month 3, I really ramped up my practice and this was when I purchased UWorld. During this period, I would do almost 200 UWorld problems per day, which was a lot. So I would alternate UWorld plus Jack Weston or UWorld plus AAMC on different days. But in any case, I made sure to do UWorld every day because I knew that I had purchased that subscription and there were 3,000 questions and I really just wanted to get through as many as I could to get my money's worth because that was not cheap. So I did push myself really hard to do those problems, but I definitely feel like you don't need to do that many problems to get a good score. I personally just found practice super helpful because just memorizing the content didn't help me with the application part of the MCAT. By month 3, I had finished most of my Kaplan review, and now I was going back to some of the more difficult chapters and reviewing key equations, trying to brush up on some of the difficult concepts, and also using the Kaplan quick sheets. If you don't know, it's essentially this tiny booklet where it summarizes the most high yield topics on the MCAT, and I would just read through that almost every day to make sure I got the most high yield topics down. This was month 3, but mostly I tried to focus on practice. Then as soon as month 4 started, I started with the full-length practice exams. So I took the AAMC full lengths around once or twice per week, and it would take 1 full day for me to take it. The next day was reserved for reviewing the whole test in detail. On the days that I didn't do practice exams, I would do more UWorld practice at the same pace. I would also do Jack Weston daily passages. They're super short. They're only about 5 questions per passage, but it just helped me to get that extra bit of practice in maybe after dinner or before bed when I don't really want to do heavy content review. I would also review the last of my Anki cards during this period, but by this time I had already studied extensively most of the content, so I didn't have to focus on that too much. By this time, I had also finished all of the AAMC practice material. I even did some of the question banks twice on the sections that I did super badly on. So I'm going to be summarizing some of my tips for the physics and then biochemistry section, which I found to be the most difficult. So for physics, because I never had any physics background going into the MCAT, I basically had to learn everything myself. I found that it is most important to understand core concepts and know your most basic equations. Just memorize your equations, know what units to use for each equation. And also when you read the questions, make sure to know what unit the question is asking you in. And when you're calculating, don't get it messed up because that's where I made the most mistakes. Minding your units will also help you remember equations as well, because if you plug in the units in place of the variables, you can see what kind of units you should be getting for your result. And a big tip is don't get intimidated by seemingly complex questions. A lot of the time, the MCAT likes to give this long paragraph of a question and you get super overwhelmed by it. However, to be honest, they are probably just asking for a simple equation. So don't get too focused on all of the text. Make sure you figure out what they're asking and what units they're asking it in. Finally, I used Organic Chemistry Tutor's videos a lot. He explains things in a manner that's super easy to understand, so I highly recommend not just for physics but also biochem as well. Speaking of biochem, The first most important thing here is to memorize your amino acids. Memorize, memorize, memorize. Just know them like the back of your hand because you are going to get tested on it for like 40% of the section. Make sure you know their properties, their names, their R groups, their abbreviations, just everything about them, hydrophobicity, etc. Another high yield topic is the major pathways such as the Krebs cycle. So make sure to know all of the steps as well as the structures. At first, I didn't know I needed to memorize the structures as well, but not to be the bearer of bad news, but you do have to memorize some of the key structures in them. Another topic you really need to know is enzyme kinetics, and this is super high yield as well, so make sure that you study that early on. Also, mnemonics are your friend when you're studying for the MCAT, not just for biochem, which I really found helpful for the pathways, but for any kind of material, or if you're a visual learner, just try to connect images with the words in your mind. I found that was super helpful for me. And there is this channel on YouTube called Med Simplified who has a lot of super helpful mnemonics, especially for pathways that you can check out. And finally, for biochem, I also recommend Andre K's YouTube channel. I think he also has a website. His videos were great for biochem. Finally, for some more general tips on the MCAT, I just want to say, first of all, there are no shortcuts to content review. Just get off YouTube and Reddit and just, as long as you know the overall general format of the exam, please just get started on content review because that is the bulk of the material and of the exam. Make sure that you are studying every single section. Just power through it. I know that it can get stressful, but after that first 2 months, you will get the hang of it. Trust me, even if it feels overwhelming right now. Make sure to start early in your prep, but not too early. I would say 5 or 6 months is the maximum, but I think 4 months is a very prime period. There are definitely people who do it in 3 months as well. It just depends on how much you already know. I also highly recommend only focusing on the MCAT full-time when you are able, because this is basically a full-time job and you're going to be too tired to study if you're also working. So try to put all of your effort into just powering through for that few months. Just try to get it done in one try because the MCAT is not an exam that you want to be doing multiple times, either financially or mentally. Another huge tip is to start practicing early because I heard this advice also from so many people. I also made that mistake. I was stuck on YouTube watching MCAT advice videos, MCAT tutorials, but I kept procrastinating because I wasn't confident in my knowledge and my skills. However, once you get practicing, at first you're gonna feel so bad about it because you're getting a lot wrong. Let me tell you, on my first AMCQ bank, I think I scored a 70 or something, and I was like, I'm gonna fail this exam. What should I do? But don't worry, you will get better. So please start early, even if you haven't finished all of your content. Just start practicing. Starting to practice early will give you time to consolidate that material. I also recommend using pre-made MCAT Anki decks, and don't try to make every single card from scratch on your own because that is so much work. There are lots that you can look up on the internet. I will say though, I did edit a lot of the pre-made cards because some of them were repetitive or unnecessary for me, but they were a really good foundation. I also recommend the Jack Weston AAMC extension, and essentially this is an extension that you can use on your AAMC prep material, and Jack Weston provides additional explanations because the AAMC explanations are sometimes a little bit lacking and a little bit short. Be strict with timing when you're practicing, especially when you're doing your practice full lengths, because I know that it can get really stressful. You can get bogged down with getting stuck on one question. However, when you see that the time is going after you've spent about a minute or a minute and a half on a question, you have to move on. The MCAT is an exam not just about content, but also about strategy. So if you guys want, I can talk more about that in a future video, but I don't want this video to get super long. Finally, take a deep breath, take care of your health, your physical health and your mental health. You really need your mind to be sharp and your body in tip-top condition for this test. Make sure to take breaks, spend time with your family. Don't just make the MCAT your entire life, even though it might feel like it is. Good luck, and thanks for watching.